My name is McRight. I'm originally from Siberia, Russia, and at a young age, my mom passed away from alcohol poisoning. Shortly thereafter, my dad left me, and so that made it to where I was raised by my grandmother. And my grandmother took care of me up until I was about 3 years old, and then she just got too old, and so she couldn't take care of me anymore. And because of that, I was put into an orphanage up for adoption. At the age of 7, I had met my now parents. They flew to Russia for the first time. And I saw them. I was so excited. I was running through all the hallways at the orphanage telling all my friends, "Das vidanya, das vidanya." My brother and I, when we were younger, we were extremely high competitive bike racers. We were cyclists. And because of that, we were constantly traveling from place to place all over the country. Every single weekend we spent pretty much on the road. So during that time was actually when we first discovered Elevate Life Church. So we go to Elevate, fall in love with it. But because of our competitive bike racing, because we were constantly traveling, we never really made church a central core thing of our life, right? We would constantly be gone on the weekends, and so church was really just a checkbox for us. So I graduated Bible college, and I kind of needed a job right away. And at the time, my brother, he was working up in West Texas, working in the oil fields. And so I called my brother up. I'm like, "Hey, I know you and I have talked about me moving up to West Texas. Is that still a possibility?" He said, "Yeah." And so I saw the money that I would be making. I said, "You know what? Sign me up." And I had a couple of weeks before I moved out. I'm going to Elevate Life Church. I start serving, meeting a bunch of new people. And I remember at the time, before I moved to West Texas, I remember one of the particular people that I met was Pastor Jess. So when Pastor Jess introduced herself, I was like, yeah, this is all cool. This is wonderful, but I already know where I'm going to go, right? The next week, Pastor Jess texted me and she's like, "Hey, you know what? I talked to some friends of yours and they had told me that you just recently graduated from Bible college. Have you ever thought about working at a church?" And I said, "You know what? I have thought about working at a church, but over here, there's a lot of money to be had." And so I was like, yeah, let me just not even entertain this conversation, right? And so a week after she had sent that text, I ended up actually moving out to West Texas. But the moment I went out there, within the first couple of months, everything just absolutely went downhill. All the work had dried up. There was a ton of jobs, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, they just completely dried up and disappeared. And so I found myself in another crossroads. Do I submit myself and humble myself and say, "God, this was the wrong decision. Let me go this way now"? And finally, I said, "You know what? All the signs are there. Everything has fallen apart. So let me go back to church." And I ended up texting Pastor Jess back a couple of months later, and I said, "Hey, Pastor Jess, by any chance, that thing we talked about, is that still on the table?" Thank God for Pastor Jess, because she responded back right away and said, "Well, no, not really, but I would love for you to come and be a part of this kids ministry." And so for me, I'd never been in kids ministry. I've never even really been in ministry outside of Bible college. And so it was a complete brand new experience, right? And after 2 weeks, I remember she said, "Hey, I think you would be a really great fit for this kids ministry. Would you be interested in working here?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I would love to." I never thought I would be in kids ministry, especially coming from West Texas, where you're around these rough and cut guys that are, the toughest of guys, the macho men, right? To being surrounded with 200 kids, right? It was a complete shock, a complete culture shock from going from West Texas to being in kids ministry, right? And I had to think to myself, I was like, man, do I really want to submit myself to our mindset? Do I really want to submit myself to this leadership? And I finally said, you know what? Me being rebellious is not going to serve anyone, because it's just brought friction in my life. So let me submit to this process. And so I said, you know what, God, it's not my way. It's not my heart. Let me do what you want, and let me really submit myself to this culture. When you submit yourself to a process and you submit yourself to the friction of growth, that's when you can genuinely transform. And when you embrace that transformation, you end up meeting some of the best people along the journey. Those people are some of the people that really helped me become the man that I am and really learned what a family of choice was. And so my encouragement to anybody that's watching this video really is be a part of this process, even when it doesn't feel good, even when it's rubbing you the wrong way. And from my experience, when something's rubbing you the wrong way, it's more than likely something you really need to hear. And it's oftentimes what God's telling you, hey, this is an area that you should grow in. And when you embrace that, and when you embrace the mindset, the culture, the amount of times that I've heard a message from like Pastor Keith or Pastor Josh or any of the pastors where I'll be like, okay, that stung a little. Let me process this. Okay, let me start acting on it. And you start realizing like, man, those things, the hurt, are what really create the biggest transformation. And so when you embrace that discomfort, that's when God will really allow for an increase in your life.